If you love liberty, declare your independence by signing the Shire Society Declaration at shiresociety.com.
On behalf of Walpole Grange, number 125, I'd like to welcome you all here to our Meet the Candidates night. The first office we're going to call on is for the office of State Senator, and alphabetically that will be Mr. Freeman, Ian Freeman. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Ian Freeman. I'm the Libertarian candidate for New Hampshire Senate District 10, and I'm glad that he brought up the war on drugs because it was going to be my first issue that I brought up. And one of my main issues is ending the entire war on drugs. It's great that New Hampshire is considering cannabis legalization and decriminalization, but the reason why there's a crisis for prescription medications, for heroin, for opiates, is because people are not happy with their lives, right? So they're trying to find a way out, and that's one of the ways that they've chosen. Unfortunately, the system that we know, which generally puts those people in prison cells if they get caught or forces them into treatment, doesn't really work very effectively. In fact, it creates, in a lot of cases, the opposite of its intended results. So if the intention of the war on drugs was to stop people from using drugs, we know that's been a failure. In the same way that we know that alcohol prohibition was a failure almost, about 100 years ago when that happened. And so people learned their lessons from the failures of alcohol prohibition, but for whatever reason they didn't apply those same exact lessons to drug prohibition. And here we are today, where drugs have become more dangerous because they're in the black market. If somebody were to be able to purchase their heroin from, and let's say Walgreens or CVS or one of those places, then you'd be getting a quality product that's actually manufactured under controlled circumstances, just like any other pharmaceutical. Unfortunately, the reason why we see so many overdoses in the streets is because people, well, they're getting questionable product from questionable sources. So what happens frequently is these overdoses, they're not intended. The person will purchase heroin, they'll expect it to be the same quality as the last batch, but it might be stronger. And so when they take that dose, they're unwittingly taking a 10 times the size dose, and they end up dying as a result of that. So I could go on this one forever, but I would like to suggest if you'd like to learn more about that issue of why we should end drug prohibition entirely, look up the good folks over at Law Enforcement Action Partnership. It used to be called Law Enforcement Against Prohibition. The guy who runs the jail here in town, Rick Van Wickler, he's one of their chair people, and he does a great job of explaining this when he has more time, as I don't. So that's the war on drugs. Also want to see taxation turn voluntary, which sounds different. I don't believe in using force, aggressive force against my neighbors. As a libertarian, I subscribe to what's called the non-aggression principle, which means that it's basically like a preschool level kind of lesson, like, hey, don't hurt other people. We kind of learned that real early on in our lives, but then we all forgot it when it came to government, because government just basically allows people to vote and then have the majority tell the minority how to live their life. And I'm not okay with that. So I'd like to see government taxation become voluntary, meaning that you could choose which government programs you wanted to support. And if you didn't want to support one of them, then they don't get to come and steal your house from you and throw you out and your family out into the streets, which is of course what happens if you don't pay property taxes. So I'd like to see that happen as well. And then ultimately secession from the United States. The United States federal government was an interesting experiment, and it's been an abject failure. It causes the deaths of countless innocent lives across the world, and we're all forced to pay for it. So I think New Hampshire would be better off as a free and independent state, which it once was. It was the first to leave the UK and under the King, and it should be the first to leave the United States. So those are three of my main issues, and the whole purpose of my campaign ultimately is to essentially delegitimize the entire concept of the state. It's an old concept, it's a decrepit, violent concept, and it's one that needs to end. And I hope that eventually, and it's not going to happen tomorrow, but I hope that eventually we'll be able to look back on the idea of the state, which I'm talking about the government, not the land of New Hampshire, that we'll be able to look back at that concept, which is essentially a concept that justifies neighbors doing violence against one another through this political system that we have. And we'll look back on it as though it were this sort of terrible thing that we wonder why we ever did that. Sort of like with how we look back on slavery today. So that's kind of my intention here. I'm happy to answer any questions you might have now or later on. So there you go. I got 2 more minutes. Yes, sir.
I think Portugal decriminalized all drugs.
That's
I
correct.
believe it's been very successful there.
Incredibly successful, definitely worth looking into that. They decriminalized small personal amounts of all drugs across the board. And it was, I think, around 15 years ago at this point. And what happened as a result of that was addiction actually dropped dramatically. And that's not because the addicts are dying off. It's because the addicts were able to and comfortable with going to look for help, because they were no longer considered to be criminals. Right now, drug users and abusers, because there's a difference, are looked at as criminals, and so they're very afraid to go and talk to doctors. They're very afraid to sort of come out and ask for the help that they need. So not only has it helped people not go to jail for what is ultimately a personal tragedy and a personal problem, but it's actually lowered addiction and it's helped the addicts that need help. So definitely look into Portugal and their experiment if you're curious about what ending the war on drugs might look like. Anyone else for right now? Thank you.
And Mr. Freeman has agreed to give us 2 minutes on behalf of Jilletta Jarvis, the Libertarian candidate for governor. Thank you.
Hi, Ian Freeman again. I can't speak for Jilletta because she didn't ask me to, but I figured I would just talk generally that she is the candidate of the free who is in favor of more freedom. We don't agree on every single issue, so that's another reason why I won't speak for her. But I would like to encourage you to visit her website, Jilletta Jarvis, 4nh.com, where you can learn more about her. One of the things that I'm grateful to see is some of the fair coverage coming from organizations like the Keene Sentinel, who did actually have Jilletta on for a full hour interview. That's available on their YouTube channel, so you can check that out and learn more about her perspective on things. And shame on WMUR and the Union Leader for excluding Jilletta and the other libertarians. I think that if we've got candidates on the ballot, more choice is a good thing. If the libertarians, if Jilletta specifically, if in her campaign or in her voting results she can get 4%, libertarians will continue to retain ballot access, which we got for the first time in 22 years in 2016. So hopefully we can do that. And hopefully 2016 wasn't just a fluke where people were really angry about Trump and Hillary and did a protest vote. So if you'd like to see more choices on your ballot, then please, Jilletta is sort of the standard bearer for that. Give her your vote. And thanks for listening. Again, Jilletta Jarvis, 4nh.com.
We'd like to invite you to visit freekeene.com. Freekeene.com features audio, video, and blogs chronicling the transition to a voluntary society. Freekeene.com also has comments and discussion forums so you can be heard. Freekeene.com.
I should be in Keene, New Hampshire with the Free Staters.